The year was 1742, when Eleanor Whitcomb's fate was sealed with the crack of carriage wheels upon a lonely dirt road. She had been summoned by letter sealed in crimson, wax bearing the crest of a raven sculped, to serve as lady-in-waiting at Ravenshollow Court, a palace whispered about in taverns but seldom spoken of openly, for its history was steeped in tragedy and shadow. As the forest closed in on either side, suffocating the path with twisted branches and skeletal trees, Eleanor could not shake the sensation of being swallowed whole. The coachman, whose face remained hidden beneath his hat, did not speak a word during the entire journey. His silence was not that of indifference, but of fear, as if uttering sound might awaken something slumbering in the woods. Eleanor pressed her gloved fingers against the carriage window, her breath fogging the glass, and for a fleeting moment she swore she saw a pale figure darting between the trees, thin, long-limbed, and not entirely human. When the road finally opened, it was only to reveal the monstrous silhouette of Ravenshollow itself. Its towers jagged and uneven, the stone blackened as though fire had once licked every wall. The windows glowed faintly, not with golden firelight, but with a deep, smouldering red, as though the palace itself contained a beating, bleeding heart. She entered through doors that groaned on their hinges like the voices of the dead, and within she was met by the chamberlain, a gaunt figure with hollow cheeks and eyes that glimmered with sleepless intensity. He welcomed her not with warmth, but with a ritualistic weight, pronouncing, "The court has awaited you." His phrasing unsettled her. He had not spoken of the king, nor of the queen, nor of any sovereign at only the court, as though the palace itself was a sentient host, and she but another guest invited to its feast. The halls were draped in heavy black velvet, muffling sound and swallowing light, and every portrait she passed bore defaced faces as gouged out, lips painted over in grotesque smears, crowns scratched into jagged scars. The air carried a metallic stench, faint but undeniable, as though the stones themselves had drunk blood for centuries and were not yet sated. At supper, she was introduced to the last remnants of nobility who clung to Ravenshollow like moths to dying flame. There was the Duchess Clarimond, pale as porcelain, whose eyelids never seemed to close, so that her gaze was an eternal, unbroken stare. There was Lord Severin, young and beautiful, but his smile was too sharp, his laughter edged with cruelty, as though mocking even the air he breathed. Others sat in silence, their faces gaunt, their lips cracked, their skin marbled with the faint grey of sickness or sorrow. The table was long enough to host 50 souls, yet no more than 7 were seated, their voices echoing unnaturally in the vast, vaulted chamber. Silver plates bore no meat, only black bread and bowls of broth so thin it resembled grave water. Still, Eleanor sensed no hunger among them. They picked at their food as if feasting were only a ritual, a mask to conceal a darker appetite. That first night, Eleanor's chamber was cold, the bed draped in tattered silk that smelled faintly of mildew. As she lay awake, listening to the wind clawing at the shutters, she heard the faint sound of weeping. It was not near, but it was not far either. It seemed to seep through the stone itself, a woman's cry, low and mournful, repeating in a rhythm almost like prayer. She rose and pressed her ear to the wall, and there fainter still she thought she heard words, "We are still here, we are still here." When she sought explanation the next morning, the chamberlain only inclined his head and whispered, "Ravenshollow remembers what it cannot forgive." The days that followed grew stranger still. The Duchess Clarimond would appear in Eleanor's chamber without sound or knock, gliding across the floor to stand at the window, staring out into the mist as though watching unseen processions. Lord Severin, meanwhile, prowled the corridors at night, his boots echoing like the toll of a bell, and more than once Eleanor caught him standing outside her door, silent, smiling when she opened it, offering no excuse for his presence. Servants whispered in corners, their faces hollow, their hands trembling whenever Eleanor asked about the king or queen. No monarch ever appeared. When pressed, the chamberlain only replied, "The court is eternal. The throne is never empty." And yet, the throne room was locked. Its doors were bound with iron chains, and on their surface strange carvings marred the wood symbols Eleanor did not recognize, though they resembled eyes, mouths, and hands, all twisted together in forms that made her stomach churn. One evening, when the wind was violent and the halls flickered with failing torchlight, she heard laughter echoing from behind those chained doors. Not joyous laughter, but manic, hollow, rising and falling like the cries of the insane. She pressed her palm to the cold iron, and in that moment the laughter stopped, only to be replaced by the unmistakable sound of scratching, as though something on the other side clawed desperately to get out. By the end of her first week, Eleanor began to realize the truth that others dared not speak. Ravenshollow was not a palace, it was a mausoleum. The nobility were not living in service of a court, but trapped within it, bound by some ancient vow or curse. At night, when she dared walk the corridors, she would see their shadows stretching across the walls, elongated, distorted, bending in ways their bodies could not. Once, she stumbled upon a mirror in the gallery, tall and cracked, and when she gazed into it, she did not see herself, but another woman altogether dressed in a gown centuries old, her face pale, her lips sewn shut with black thread, tears of blood trailing down her cheeks. When Eleanor staggered back, the reflection only smiled. Still, she could not leave. The carriage that had brought her was gone. The gates of the palace stood locked, rusted chains heavy across them. And every time she attempted to walk beyond the gardens, the mist grew thicker, folding back upon itself until she found herself standing once more before the palace steps. She realized with mounting dread that Ravenshollow was no place one arrived at by chance. It was a trap, a labyrinth without end, a court that chose its attendants not for service, but for sacrifice.